Welcome to the 39th Color Lab Convention. This session is titled A Visit with the Legends. This session is also being recorded, and if we have questions later after we get done interviewing these gentlemen, well, we'll have a microphone for all of you to use. I will have to tell you that history is a passion for me, and I like all kinds of it: Revolutionary War, Civil War, Oregon Trails, Santa Fe Trail, World War II, you name it, I like it. But I especially enjoy music history and our square dance history. And it has long been one of my thoughts that we needed to have some way to record something about the people who have created the activity that we now enjoy. And as it's evolved, it's kind of become this visit with the legends that Color Lab has done over the last few years. And I'm very proud to be here. A visit with these guys is that they started in the activity when the activity really started to become what we know today. And today we're going to have 4 of these guys we're going to visit with. This first gentleman is from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is Bob Brundage. And the second gentleman's from Cincinnati, Ohio, Jerry Helt. The third gentleman is from Aledo, Texas, which is surrounded by Fort Worth. That's Melton Luttrell. And the guy that isn't here you can't see is from Tucson, Arizona, formerly of Abilene, Texas, is Marshall Flippo. He is wandering around the hall. That's exactly right. This is not unusual. Ladies and gentlemen, he has entered the room, Marshall Flippo.
Well, it usually takes care of me, and hell, I couldn't find him. He's in here.
I'll tell you, you're supposed to sit there. I'll tell you a very brief story about him. A few years ago, I was driving in Iowa, got a phone call from Ken Bauer, and he said, "Jerry, you got a map?" I said, "What?" He said, "You have a map." I said, "Well, yeah, I got a map." He said, "Pull over, we're lost." I said, "Who's we?" He said, "Me and Flippo." I said, where are you?" And he said, "We're in Missouri." I said, "You can't be lost. Flippo lived there 41 years. He said, "No." He said, "We got directions from a convenience store. We don't know where we are." So I pulled over. Now I'm 500 miles away, and I'm thinking my leg is being pulled. And got my map out, and I said, "What town are you beside?" Flippo says, "Got no earthly idea." I said, "I have to have more direction than that." He said, "Well, here comes a town, here comes a town." He said, "Osawatomie." I said, "You are lost, you're in Kansas, you're not in Missouri." True story. I'm not kidding. He did not. Anyway, it's a privilege to have these guys at our convention, and for those of you that haven't called very long, to listen to their stories, because it's really cool. We're going to start with Bob Brundage. He's sitting right next to me. He started calling a very long time ago, and got into the activity with his parents. He got into the activity with his brother, Al Brundage, and Bob even brought along a picture. Part of what I wanted Bob here for was that he and Al started calling in a chicken coop. I'm not kidding. Started calling in a chicken coop. We have a picture right here in front of me. The gentleman on the other end of the podium here that is lost also started calling in a chicken coop.
They were cleaned out.
Anyway, I want to introduce you to Al Brundage. Give him a great big hand. We're so glad he's here. Bob Brundage, excuse me. Bob, if you would, I'd like to know a little bit of your history. There's a picture here, and we'll let some of you, we'll pass that around. This is a picture of a band. Everything was live music at that time. And Bob, go ahead and tell them about this, if you would, please.
Okay, well, this concept of 3 of us starting to call in a chicken coop, and this is a picture in the chicken coop, actually. the men in the community where I lived, called King Street, outside of Danbury, Connecticut, got together, and there was an abandoned farm, almost abandoned farm, that had a chicken coop. And the owner of it said, well, if you want to turn it into a 4-H clubhouse, well, go ahead. So the men in the community got together. They put down a new floor. They took a fire gun and got rid of all the lice and so forth on the walls, the ceiling. They put a ceiling in the building, and they refinished the walls, painted it up, and you can see there's an emblem of the 4-H club, and that's where Al and I started.
The year is 1933.
Right. This picture was taken in 1933 and was published in the Fairfield County 4-H Club or Extension Service Journal in 1934, and there you'll find myself sitting at the far left, and our mother playing the piano, and Al with a trumpet up, so you can't even see his face because of the trumpet. But and that's where we actually got started. The fellow on banjo next to the piano did most of the calling until he finished school and got his accounting degree and moved out of town. And that's when Al and I started shortly after this picture was taken. Al started calling first, and you know, little brother couldn't ever stand to have big brother outdo him, so he had to start calling as well. And so that was around the 1934, 35 that I actually started. And this is we used to have dances occasionally. A lot of it depended on the weather, because there was no driveway. There was this chicken coop was actually in an apple orchard, and we usually got one square, and if most of the people showed up, we might wind up with 2 squares. And here, amazingly, 75 years later, we have groups all over the country that are struggling to get 2 squares. Right? I hate to think about that, but that's where we started, and go ahead.
Well, from then you progressed on. You did more calling, and in the New England area, you started developing clubs. Right. Was this after the war, before the war?
Well, my experience was that I attended the Lloyd Shaw summer school in 1954, and that was the beginning. It was just about that time that Modern Western's calling was starting to appear in New England. I always thought that the activity in New England got started when Herb Gregerson came and put on a workshop in Brockton, Massachusetts. And I've been dying to find out when that was, but I can't seem to locate exactly when that was. But he was the one that introduced Do Paso. I'd love to expound on that a little bit sometime. But
I have been told that Herb came in 1952 to do that workshop.
That was just about exactly what I expected, yeah. And some of us began to learn that Herb had been away from, he lived in Ruidoso, New Mexico, and he was on a workshop tour, and he, in a 1-month period that he was on this tour, he had to dance every night somewhere along the line, and he was charging $100 a night. And all of a sudden, those of us who were struggling to make $10 or $15 a night, suddenly perked up and said, whoa. And that's when we first started the idea of square dance clubs. At that time, I was living in Massachusetts, working at the University of Massachusetts, and that was the first square dance club that I formed. Was outside of Springfield, Massachusetts, and shortly thereafter we expanded to Western Massachusetts. Had a huge activity. We had a monthly newsletter that came out that was 2 pages long, single spaced on both sides, and today it's down to a half page. But
you also were some of the first guys to record UNL.
Yeah.
Because before that time, before what year did you use mostly live music?
Well, oh yes, we always had live music up until Modern Western came along, and we had a struggle actually with amplification equipment when this type of program started out. My original set of equipment was called a Green Flyer, and it had a the first one that I bought had no case. I had to build a case to hold it, and it was a struggle to try to find equipment that had a very variable speed possibility. I think the Green Flyer had the ability to vary 10 degrees one way or the other, and that was it. Because many of the square dance records that were available at that time were money that had done in Texas. Herb Gergerson was one, and I forget the name of some of the others, but they were 150 beats a minute. You could
I'm breathing heavy just thinking of it.
slow it down as far as you could, and you're still going 140. So.
All right, and then Bob has the distinction. He had the idea to interview some of these legends. How many legends over the last few years have you interviewed, Bob?
Well, I started this oral history project in 1996. I went to the National Square Dance Convention in El Paso, and that's where I hooked up with the first interviews that I did, and since then I've accumulated about 140. I kind of lost track. I think we have 110 of them on the Square Dance Foundation of New England's website, and there's others that are owned by the Lloyd Shaw Foundation, and those have been unable to get onto our New England Foundation's website, but during the course of that time, from then up until shortly, not too long ago, when I made the last interview, I was living in Albuquerque, and I went to the West Coast about 3 times. I went to the East Coast at least twice. I went down into the Florida area, and these entirely at my own expense. And I'm sure I traveled at least 25,000 miles to get to interview these people, many times at a national convention or in their own home. I was so happy to visit with people like Cal Golden and sit in his basement and look at the pictures that he had on his wall in his recreation room and so forth. One of Milton Rutrow was one of my earlier interviewees, and I got him at one of the nationals. And so the count actually is 110 that are available on the New England Foundation's website at the moment.
What do you think? Bob Brendan. Well done. These interviews are very interesting. We're going to move on because we want to get all four of these gentlemen in. But the dedication that Bob displayed to get these interviews, to get this oral history put down, is pretty significant. And this picture, may I just pass this around, Bob? Would that be all right for those of you to see it? And this is 1933. Understand that square dancing had almost died out. In the 20s, Henry Ford started to put square dancing back on the map. He actually got it on the radio in Detroit. And then Lloyd Pappy Shaw, whom Bob went to their color school at Cheyenne Mountain, that's where the revivals started and where the spreading of square dancing came about. Our next caller is an old friend.
Thank you.
It is. He's an old friend. Many, many, many years ago at a Color Lab convention. He is from Cincinnati, Ohio, and has been calling full time since 1953. And if you would, give a nice hand to Jerry Hill.
Thank you very much. I think I'm probably really the youngest up here. I started calling when I had diapers on, of course. I'm back to diapers again. Full circle, yes. My wife says, "You think he's kidding?" Anyway, I feel very near and dear. I'm looking at this picture, and it has a 4-H sign on it. And my first experience with dancing was at a 4-H camp, where they had girls on one side of the campus, boys on the other side. We were divided, and the way they controlled this group was to take them in a dance hall and just dance the pants off of us. Good. And then everybody... Not literally, Marshall. And everybody would go to bed, or supposed to go to bed, and by themselves, of course. And so that was an experience for me, and I thought, this is really fun to do. And to hear the guy call, he wasn't much of a caller, but it was very interesting that he could control people and move people around like contra lines, basically contra lines.
Jerry, may I interrupt you to say, what year was this and where?
This would be, what would you say, Mama? 1943, the war years, yes. In fact, I guess the Japanese war was ended at one of those weekends that we did, which was kind of interesting. Anyway, 4-H is kind of near and dear to me. Being a country boy living on a farm, we belonged to a church, a very strong Protestant church that did not believe in dancing. So as time went on, I had a friend who drove a car, and we found out that the Catholics could dance. So we would go to the Saturday night dance with the Catholics and have a great time. You know, these people were really, you know, swinging back in this other group, this church people that are all sitting around praying with each other. And so that was my early start in traveling around, doing dances and so forth. A home program was really what I was after. Well, I went to school, went to engineering school, the University of Cincinnati, and to sort of work my way through the school, I did one-nighters or dances around the Cincinnati area to raise little funds to live on, and finished my engineering. I practiced that for what, 1 year, and decided to go into dancing. Square dancing is a full-time thing, which was, my family said, you're crazy. You've worked hard to get a degree, and you're going to be a square dance caller. What kind of an idiot are you? So I thought, well, it's a chance. I can always go back and be an engineer. Well, the truth is, never went back. Here I am, an idiot, you know, doing square dance calling. So it's been very enlightening. It's been really nice to deal with people. I enjoy being with people. And I think square dancing has probably saved a lot of people from many things. Saved marriages. It's saved people from having mental problems, all sorts of things. It's a mental health. I'm on a crusade of mental health, of which we all need, don't we, Philippo? Anyhow, to make a short story, or make a long story short, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored. I'm a little embarrassed to be in front of a group of people talking about this because we don't usually discuss our personal life much.
Particularly diapers.
Yes. You should know. I'll pass the mic on to this next gentleman.
I've got a few questions for you.
Yes.
By the way, Jerry Helt's wife, Kathy, is sitting right here. If you would give her. Jerry has been a recording artist, as has Bob, as has all these gentlemen here. Blue Star, McGregor, Scope, Sets in Order, Hollywood, Kentucky Gateway Records. He has recorded with the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra. That's quite a thing.
Yes, it
quite
is.
An accomplishment. He's got video and audio cassettes. He is a member of the American Square Dance Society Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
And I want you to tell a little bit about what I think is one of your phenomenal things you do at a dance, and that's your exploding squares.
Well, I can't take credit for exploding squares and
Don't
progressive
have to
squares.
take credit for it, just tell us about
Okay,
it.
well, Ed Gilmore was the man that dreamed this up. He didn't really dream it up. There's a story about that he called a dance one night and the people were in positions into the progressive square line position, and they were passing on to another square. They were doing it on their own. And poor Ed was calling, and the floor was staying together, and they were moving, but it was driving him crazy. What are they doing? They had this thing all set up. Every time they get lines, they'd pass through and pass through on to the next. So this was really the start of progressive squares, and exploding squares is, as you all know, squares exploding out into other squares. So Ed is the man that put that together, and all I did was ride in on his experiences. And they're really fun to do. I don't know how many do it, but you should do it. It's very good, lots of fun, very fulfilling.
Also, Jerry has called full-time since 1953. You've called in all the states in the United States and most of the provinces in Canada. But you are known for corporate parties. You do a lot of corporate parties that type of calling. Explain a little bit about that and how that's been good to you.
Okay. Financially, corporations have a lot of moolah. And in many cases, corporations like to have some sort of a party or many times they want to know about some dancing, American dancing. What do we do in America? Some of these corporations have people in from Japan, they have people in from all over Europe, and they like to show off what we do as a recreation. So square dancing is probably the recreation we're thinking of. And many times we're hired for a company that has a reception or a group of people at meetings who want to relax and have a good time with square dancing. And that's where the one-nighter, or if you want to call it that, or new dancer program starts. And we do a lot of those. They're very lucrative. Corporations like it, and they'll pay. It's no problem with the financial end of it. So we have geared a lot of our dances in that area, plus the schools. We're definitely interested in getting young kids from kindergarten all the way to college level dancing, and we do a program for kindergarten. We do a whole college campus program, and I would recommend that anybody that's square dance calling to look into that. It's putting our square dancing out there where people really know what it is and know that we do have a traditional dance or a square dance that we should promote. Well, one little thing in recording with the Cincinnati Pops, we're looking at 100 musicians, union scale, and to get up in front of that group and call, it's kind of shaky. And just as we were ready to record with this, one of the stage hands come up and said, can you kind of step it up a little bit? We're running a little behind. We're looking at $1,000 a minute. At that point, I wet my pants, but I have the diapers on. Anyway, it was pretty scary, and we did it, and it's my, I guess, fame to claim, or claim to fame. I don't know what you'd call that. Thank you.
It's very, very interesting. How many of you ever heard of a gentleman named Bob Ruff? From Whittier, California. I have never seen Jerry work with schools, but Bob Ruff came to our college when I was going to college, Wayne State College. And I went over there one day and watched the most wonderful exercise of working with college kids I've ever seen, and I assume that you do the very same thing. Indeed, it's very, very, very interesting. Give a nice hand to Jerry.
Thank you.
The next gentleman over here is from Aledo, Texas, and he just told me it's surrounded by Fort Worth. Aledo's in the middle of it. Give a nice hand to Melton Luttrell. We're gonna ask Melton when he started square dancing.
Square dancing?
And calling.
First square dance was in 1945, just in the fall of 45. I had a girlfriend in college. It was my first year in college. God, I wish I still had her. She was the one girl before wife that I'd have married, but she stood me up. And I always look back at my failure to go square dancing because of it. I went one time and I didn't like it with her, and she loved it. So, and she kept on and kept going, and we kept dating for a while, and she finally tossed me over for a guy that liked to square dance. Very little exaggeration on that. That's pretty well the way it was. And then after I finally met the lady that became my wife, I sort of got tricked into the square dancing thing. My mother and dad had started about a couple of years before me, and they also tried to get me to, and no, I've been there and done that, and I don't like it. But Sue and I were still in the dating stage, and one night, and this is back when double dating was sort of popular when I was growing up. I don't know whether it still is or not, but I think the mothers of the daughters felt safer if their daughter was double dating, so they encouraged that. So Sue called me up one day on the old-time telephones and said, do you mind if we double date tonight? And I said, no, that'd be fine. He said, okay. He said, we have a couple that's going to pick us up at such and such o'clock. And I said, a little earlier. He said, no. I said, we're going to go somewhere. Okay. Well, where we went was from one town to another town, which was about 35 miles away, about in West Texas at that time. And we went to Eastland, Texas, from Breckenridge, Texas. And on the way, I discovered we were riding with a square dance caller who was taken to his first night of lessons. So I really didn't get a chance to even decline it. You know, sort of embarrassed and say, well, I'm riding in your car and I don't want to go. But needless to say, it was not like in college. It was completely different. College was sort of, college square dance at that time was not a lot to it. And this was pretty interesting, you know, so I sort of fell for it to begin with. That was our first dancing. And that was in September. Well, by November, I was already ready to be a caller. So that whole 2 months, you know, I got so accomplished in square dancing, but it only took you 10 lessons to learn everything there was pretty well about square dancing. Those days is all memorized patterns. So we belonged to a club who, in those days, believe it or not, you had to be invited to join. It wasn't a thing that you say, I'm going to come to your club. You were invited, and once you visited, there was a membership committee that either recommended you or didn't recommend you to join, because there was 100 couples in the club, and that was the limit that the hall would hold, and that's all they had. The name of the club was Dip and Dive, which had just come out as a brand new call somewhere along that time. I may be wrong about that. Maybe I exaggerate that. Maybe that wasn't the name of it. But anyway, it was something similar to that. It was a square dance term. And so luckily we were young enough, and Sue was pretty enough that they invited us to join. And we did, and there was 100 couples, and each time we danced, which was twice a month, you came to that club later on. And about the first 10 couples down the line, and then the next 10 were responsible for hosting the dance. And there were no professional callers except the one that taught us, and he lived in a different city. So what we did was rely on someone that knew 1 or 2 square dance patterns that would get up and call. And when it came our time, the chairman of that particular group of 10 couples was always the first couple on the list, who was the chairman. And he came to me and said, Melton, you and I are going to have to learn a square dance call. And I said, why is that? He said, because I cannot come up with enough callers for the program. And we had printed programs that we turned out every week with the names of the dances. And I was reluctant, but I thought, well, give it a whirl. He gave me a sheet of paper similar to what I'm looking at here with a square dance call on it. And I well remember the name of it, and I'm not sure how old you guys are. I know I'm as old as any of you, but it was called Double the Dose. Anybody recall that?
Yes.
Double the dose. And so I thought I memorized double the dose from start to end. You know, it's had a little opening where you circle left and around the ring and break that ring with a corner swing, and on to the next and around that ring and break that ring with a corner swing. Swing that opposite across the hall, because you ain't been swung since late last fall, and promenade home in the little red wagon, hind wheel off the back old dragon. That kind of stuff. You know, you memorize the whole thing. And the first old couple lead out and double the dose with the one on the right and the one on the left, meet in the middle with the once and a half, and so forth. Down to the end of the hall, come back across, same old thing, till you're on, everybody swing, everybody promenade. And you do it for the second couple, then the third couple, the fourth couple. So we got to memorize one time through and repeat it 4 times. Live music, of course. Didn't even know what a square dance record was.
Melton, I'm going to interrupt you right here because Bob talked about live music. I know Jerry called to live music. We visited the other night down in the lobby. What did you pay the band?
Okay. I can't tell you what they paid him because I wasn't a member of the paying committee on that club. But I can tell you a little later what I paid mine when I first started on my own. But let me put that off just for a minute. So then, so sure enough, I got up and they had the live band, which consisted of a piano, always got to have a fiddle in Texas, fiddle in the band, a fiddle, a bass fiddle, and a rhythm guitar. And that was 4 instruments that made up our square dance band. And they all drove about 30 miles to get there from a different little town. So we started out, it come my time to call, and I am sweating blood. And I walk up there, and I'd never done anything like that except when I was in the 4th grade or something. My dad wanted me to learn to play guitar, which I never did learn to play. But anyway, I got up there, and the guy was the band leader, who was a bass fiddle player, turned to me and said, what hoedown do you want? And I thought, hoedown. Oh, any of them's okay. What key do you want it in? I thought, key, and I wasn't completely naive, but I almost was. I said, well, I'm not sure what key. And he said, what are you singing? I said, oh, I don't know, just play something that'll probably be all right. Trying to shrug it off like I knew what I was doing. And they kicked it off, and it hit me. Fortunately, it hit my range, and I called Ida Red, was the name of the hoedown. Ida Red, she ain't no fool, she ain't cooked by broke, or something like that. Anyway, so it worked perfectly. I mean, the music for me, I thought, God, that is good. So I called it, and very few goose, I got through it pretty well, and got a nice applause, and you know how that makes your adrenaline flow. Man, God, I must be pretty good, all the applause. Well, compared to people you don't know named Curly Maynard and Dutch, somebody else, I was pretty good compared to those old geezers. Because I was like 21, and they were like 45 or 50. They were old geezers. So I turned around to the band before I got off stage. I said, what was that key? He said, key of F. I said, Ida Red in F. He said, yeah. I said, good. Well, then soon I started going to other dances, that were around different communities and within a 20, 30, 40 mile range. They all had a little square dance club, and they all had a band. And they had heard that I had called, so they invited me to call because they needed callers. Nobody was paid. And every time I'd get up and say, well, you want to play? I said, Ida Red and F. I spent a year training to Ida Red and F. I don't think they play the key of F anymore, do they? If they get off of it, they don't. I found out later on they don't like to play it. But anyway, that was the way that went. That was funny to me.
Melton.
So that was sort of that. Now then, I'll quickly get to your other point. So I decided after a little bit of that, man, this is pretty good. I'm going to make this money on my own, and I don't want to particularly work for anybody. I'd rather do it on my own. So they were opening a new drive-in theater halfway between Ranger and Eastland, which was about 12 miles apart. It was sort of midway. And I had heard somewhere where they had a square dance as an opening night at a drive-in theater of another little town, West Texas. Somebody else's idea, but why don't I take it? So I went out during the construction phase, and I found the guy that was the owner and having it built. And I propositioned him. I said, on your opening night, why don't we have a little extra celebration, and I'll bring you a square dance? And he said, that sounds like it might be a most thing. I said, well, you can put out flyers to advertise, and I'll guarantee you we'll have people there. I said, we got like 100 couples, this one club that I belong to. Okay, and he said, where do we dance? I said, we're going to have something other than dirt, He said, well, I'm building the concession stand. I'll just add a little extra slab out in front for a few squares. That's a good idea. So he did that. And then I talked to him a little further. He said, what are you going to charge me? And I said, And I'm thinking, my God, what did that guy charge for teaching those lessons? And it seemed like I remember he charged $10 or $15, or 10, I think. I thought, I'm going to be brave. I said, $15 is my price. He said, 15? I said, yeah. And he haggled with it a little bit. And he said, oh, well, okay, 15. And I said, now we're going to have music. He said, okay. And I said, how many orchestra pieces do you think we ought to have? We call them band pieces. He said, I don't know, what do you think? I said, oh, I like to work with 4. That's what I usually work with, like I knew what I was doing. He said, 4's all right with me. I said, how much do you think we should pay him? He said, that's out of your $15. That is, so help me God, that's a true story. I didn't embellish that an ounce. I said, what? And we haggled a bit. He said, no, I can't do any more than that. So I went out and hired a fiddle and a guitar, paid them $750, and I took $750. And we split it. Now I'm on to the quick part of the story, and I'll get off here. But the funny thing was, first night, and we had a bunch of people because they'd advertised it with flyers around town and then a little local newspaper, big opening, and featured a square dance, and he had my name, you know, like I was somebody, which I wasn't. Nobody knew who I was, but they put it on there and they thought I was somebody. So they all came out, and I come out the first night. Well, the only microphone they had was one that he had. I didn't have one that they announced over the loudspeaker things that went to the cars, you know. So he was going along with that, and I thought, well, how about the music, you know? So we got ready, and I thought, where am I going to set the music here? And he said, I got a place for you. He said, where is it? You're going to think I'm lying again. But I'm not. So help me God, I'm telling the truth. He said, I thought it'd be real nice if y'all sit up there. I said, up where? On top of the concession stand. How are we going to get up there? And he said, I got a ladder. Had no wood ladder. So we all climb up down there. And those musicians in those days, country musicians, just like you all, used to sit down. Nobody stood up. They sat down when they played. You know, the fiddle player and guitar player, they had to have a chair. So they put folded chairs for them up there, and they weren't amplified. And I've got a microphone that's going out through the speaker system, and nobody could hear them. Disaster. I'm looking over the edge at the dancers. But you know, it worked for almost 6 weeks. Every week for about 6 weeks. And it got to be at the last couple of weeks, the people in the cars that come early for the movie were so disgusted just hearing me and nothing else. They couldn't hear the music. You know, they could just sit there and hear me up there, which is like somebody said that session yesterday, if you're in a recording session with the music, you sound pretty good, but take away the music and listen to your voice, you know, you sound like god awful. That's what they were hearing. So all of a sudden, one horn, they go, then another, and first thing you know, half the cars in the theater went, honk, 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 honk. In other words, get the heck out of there. And I did, and I did now.
All right, now.
I made $7.50.
You made $7.50. Now, we're not quite done with Melton, because there was a gentleman sitting next to him, Marshall Flippo, who started square dancing about that time, what came over there. He wanted to learn to call. And Melton led him on the program. And Melton, what did you tell Marshall Flippo the first time you heard him call?
I didn't want to tell him how awful he was, but I felt like it. I'll tell you, word for word, as near as I can remember, you can either say yes or no. I said, hey, they come up, the fellow guy, what's the guy's name that brought you up? Alvin Cox brought him up and said, and Alvin introduced him to me to begin with. Said, I got this young guy learning to call, and he's never called anywhere but at home, and said, I wonder if you could let him call. And I said, sure. Then after he said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, gosh almighty, Flippo, you got a really, really nice voice, but I'm trying to be fair to you. I said, in all honesty, I said, my God, you can't even put your foot down to the music. It's just so, you're so far off the beat, it's unreal. And he said, well, how did I do to correct that? Well, I had gone to Herb Gregson's collar school in 1950. And one of the things Herb told us was that if you really want to learn to call well, you need to learn to call while you're dancing. Said get in a square and call to that square while you're dancing, and it'll develop your timing and keep you on the beat and so forth. I said, well, I can only pass on what I was given at collar school from Herb Gregson. And I said, just do that. So he went home to the chicken coop and got a square, and they were only ones, he and his buddies were all about his size. They were only ones short enough to fit into it. I couldn't have danced in it.
Thank you, Melton Luttrell. Give him a nice hand.
I want to add one quick thing. I had the opportunity to call to a symphony orchestra. You're not the only one. They just didn't care about recording me. But they engaged me one time to do a square dance in an opera, and I think the name is, people that are knowledgeable about opera might remember, I think it's called Julia or something like that. And they had the only thing was they had a slanted stage that the dancers had to dance on so that the audience could see them, you know, and they were at like an angle like this. Oh, that was an experience because I couldn't see the orchestra. They were way down in the pit somewhere.
All right. All of that leads me up to the next gentleman. Ladies and gentlemen, he's from Tucson now, but from Abilene, Texas, Marshall Flippo. Give it a big because Bob and Al started in a chicken coop, and I knew Flippo did. I didn't realize it was a short chicken coop. I'm sorry about that. Not very tall. But Flip did, in order to learn to call, took Melton's advice and learned to dance. Tell them about the chicken coop, Flippo.
Well, the chicken coop was in Whole 3 Squares. It's out of Wiley, Texas. It's where I went to school. And a old boy named Ed Hall had a farm out there, and he had a chicken coop. And he was in the same class that Betty Casey that we were in 1950. And Betty Casey told us, and he said, and they had a club in Abilene now that was 25 square club, and it was kind of like Melton said, you had to be invited to join that club. So he said, I got an old chicken coop out there. I'll clean that sucker out and we'll dance out there. They said, well, how big is it? Well, he said, I don't know. Big enough for a couple of squares. So it'd hold about 3 squares. He cleaned it up real good. And we danced out there, and we didn't have any caller, so we danced to records when there wasn't many records at the time. Let's Go tried some out, and Joe Louis, and Jonesy. Do you remember Jonesy? Mm-hmm. Jonesy had some records out on Capitol that you couldn't dance. And what had happened, he played in a band, and he just picked up the lingo, you know, and he's, I can record this stuff, so he recorded a bunch of it. It just, what he picked up, he didn't know it wouldn't work or whatever. But then he got to where he could call. But anyway, so there's 3 squares out there. We didn't have any, like I said, we didn't have any music, or band or anything. So we all decided to learn one call. And I remember I had a big old record like this. I forget what the hold down was, but it wasn't your hold down.
It wasn't Skillet Licking, I don't imagine.
No. But anyway, I learned Dip and Dive. That was the first one I learned. And all the rest of the guys, we learned one apiece. So we had 12 callers there, and we go right through a dance pretty good. So then somebody said, there's no boy over in Eastland, man, he's good. Said, we ought to go over and dance to him. He got a band going and everything. Well, now in Abilene, they had a band uptown, you know. But I tell you, the band that Melton had over there, we'd go over every second and fourth Tuesday night over to Eastland and dance to Melton. It's before I ever started calling. And boy, he had a good band. And Al Parks, Gerald Parks, Travis, and Coon Dawson. Coon Dawson's a fiddle player. Bootlegger. And I'll guarantee you, I've never seen a square dance band that good as those guys were. Of course, Gerald and Al were brothers, and Gerald played the piano, and Al played the rhythm guitar, and they were flat good. And so I don't know what else.
Well, when you did the chicken coop thing, you learned to call learned to call your calls. But as you expanded from that, you went out of the chicken coop. You also, in 1958, helped build a hall. Were these 12 couples or several of these couples involved in that? Because that hall is still there.
No, there were just 4 couples, but they weren't involved with the chicken coop at all.
Okay. Flippo was calling with live music at the time, and it heard.
Well, he decided to move on to Fort Worth and go back to TCU and finish his education. So I said, can I take that band over to Abilene? Or they come over there? He said, sure, go ask them. So they came over there, and so we, and I never will forget, you know, you call to the band, and if you cut across or something, they'd cut across with you, and you never know it. So I got this record on, My Little Girl, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and I called it with the band, you know, and just go right through it. And I got this record from Windsor, and I got to this one place, and the record was bad. So my wife knew a little about music. I said, Lisa, come here. This record is, I'm going to send it back. It's not right. And she said, what's wrong with it? I said, well, it gets off tune and everything. Well, I wasn't waiting for the phrase to end, see. So she told me, said, wait, you got to wait there at that one point. You got to wait there. Every time we'd go through 7 times, we'd go through that damn thing, and at that one particular point, I'd cut across, you know, and wait for the end of the phrase. So she finally taught me, said, you got to wait there. So I never will forget Al Parks played a rhythm guitar. Next time I called with the band, I waited. And then been cutting across. So I get through it.